Boğaziçi Üniversitesi Rektörlüğü'ne Melih Bulu'nun atanmasıyla başlayan protestolar bir ayı geride bırakırken eylemler yurt geneline yayıldı. Boğaziçi Üniversitesi kampüsü polis karakoluna dönüşürken yaklaşık bir ay önce üniversite kapısına takılan kelepçe artık Boğaziçi'li öğrencilerin bileğinde.
In an exhibition organized within the rector protests ongoing at Boğaziçi University, a picture of the Kaaba was combined with the LGBTI flags. Afterwards, appointed rector Melih Bulu, Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu, Justice Minister Abdülhamit Gül, and Director of Religious Affairs Ali Erbaş targeted the students.
Afterwards, 5 of the 2 detained students were arrested due to the public incitement towards resentment and hostility, and 2 students were sentenced to house imprisonment. The students testified at the security due to denigrating religious values. However, since this charge did not require arrest, the charge was changed to public incitement towards resentment and hostility, instead by the prosecutor's office.
Students gathered in front of the university making a call for the release of their detained and arrested friends. The police attacked the students in front of the university and special security guards attacked the students inside the campus. Afterwards, the appointed rector ordered the police to enter the campus. The protester students were first taken under blockade, then 159 students were beaten and detained. The protest first spread outside the campus, then around the country.
Tutuklu ve kelepçeyle ev hapsinde tutulan öğrencilerimizin derhal serbest bırakılmasını, kampüslerimizde uzlaşı imkanlarını engelleyen polis mevcudiyetine son verilmesini istiyoruz. Boğaziçi Üniversitesi öğrencisi, hocası, çalışanları, mezunlarıyla başarısını ve saygınlığını 1,5 asırdan beri ülkemizde ve dünyada kanıtlanmış bir kurum olarak yoluna devam etmektedir, edecektir. Kabul etmiyoruz, vazgeçmiyoruz.
Being protested by academics and students for a month, Melih Bulu defined himself as the rector of the government. However, he still couldn't find academic personnel who would work with him in the university administration. His first action was to turn the university into a police station. Afterwards, he closed the LGBTI Studies Club at the university. We will not look down has turned into the slogan of the protests. The security directorate left everything aside and attempted to explain the visuals, which was previously called disinformation. The General Directorate of Security was not interested in the arbitrary attitude of the police beating the students and stated that in the visuals, the police didn't say look down, but instead move down.
Biz polisin gerçekte ne dediğini söyleyelim. İtaat et, ses çıkarma.
Siz öğrenci misiniz? Siz talebe misiniz? Yoksa siz rektörün odasını basmaya kalkışan, orayı işgale kalkışan terörist misiniz? Ama inşallah onlar da adım adım bu ülkenin üniversitesi olduklarını, bu millete hizmet etmekle mükellef olduklarını anlayacaklar.
As the students continue their protests for their arrested and detained friends, the Istanbul Governorate launched a list of identified gathering areas in the province. Thus, it was banned to gather anywhere other than the areas identified by the Governorate. Right before the protest organized in Kadıköy for the detained and arrested students, the district governorate banned all meetings and demonstrations across the district for the next 7 days. The local administrations banned all protests with the excuse of the pandemic, whereas these bans didn't affect Erdogan at all.
Bu salgına rağmen tıklım tıklım bu salonları haftanın başında oralarda buluşma ve buluşturmayı sağladığınız için sizlere çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Protests faced police attacks everywhere, especially in Istanbul, Ankara and Izmir. Investigations were started against university students over making calls for the release of their detained friends, as well as over sharing information on the protests at Boğaziçi University on social media. At least 8 people were detained within the investigations conducted due to creating public turmoil in accordance with Article 216 of the Turkish Criminal Code. 3,317 academics, writers and intellectuals, including Judith Butler and Noam Chomsky, launched a solidarity letter with Boğaziçi University, calling the Justice and Development Party government to respect academic freedom and university independence, and Rector Bolu to resign. The signatories further demanded for the arrested students to be released immediately.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights made a call for the students who were detained during the protests to be released and for the police to stop using disproportionate force. The United Nations further reprimanded government officials making homophobic and transphobic comments that encouraged discrimination against LGBTIs. The Turkish Interior Ministry replied to those reactions and said it's nobody's place to intervene Turkey's domestic affairs. The Interior Ministry further announced numbers on the protests. According to the announcement, 528 people were detained in 38 provinces. 2 students were arrested so far and 498 people were released, 108 of whom facing judicial measures. The ministry ended the statement with a threat as well, saying, "Let no one question the power of the state."
Hiç kimseye devletimizin gücünü sınamasını tavsiye etmiyoruz. Bu sözümüz herkese.
Immediately after the ministry statement, the numbers were updated. The police attacked protests in Çanakkale, Samsun and Bursa. At least 43 people were detained. 23 people were detained in Istanbul, 10 were arrested, and 13 were sent to court with claims of judicial measures.
Ardından 2 kişi daha tutuklandı. 14 kişiye de ev hapsi cezası verildi. Anayasanın 34. maddesine göre herkes izinsiz gösteri hakkına sahiptir. Bunun için de herhangi bir yerden ve makamdan izin alma zorunluluğu yok. Dolayısıyla izinsiz gösteri gerekçesiyle barışçıl protestolara müdahale açık ve kasti bir şekilde anayasa ihlali. Anayasa ihlali demişken Erdoğan bu hafta hukuk reformu vaadinde el yükseltti.
Belki de şimdi Türkiye'nin tekrar yeni bir anayasayı tartışmasının vakti gelmiştir.
Yapılan onlarca değişikliğe rağmen aslen bir darbe dönemi ürünü olan yürürlükteki anayasadaki özgürlük kırıntılarına bile tahammül gösteremeyen, anayasayı açıkça her gün ihlal etmeye devam eden bir iktidardan gelen bu çıkış hayli ironik olsa gerek. Keza Anayasa Mahkemesi'ne göre artık yargı organları bile anayasanın öngördüğü hukuk düzenine karşı hareket ediyor.
The reason for the second rights violation issued by the Constitutional Court for former Republican People's Party parliament member Enis Berberoğlu was published in the National Gazette. The decree pointed out to the state of law as well as to Constitutional Court decrees being binding for all. No legal system could allow arbitrary decrees that mean to go against the legal system predicted by the Constitution, the decree stated. The High Court further emphasized that the Constitution does not authorize public institutions and lower-rank courts to resist or debate Constitutional Court decrees, indicating that the local court is violating the Constitution.
Gelelim haftanın diğer öne çıkan başlıklarından bizim seçtiklerimize. 1193 gündür cezaevinde tutulan Osman Kavala'nın darbeye teşebbüs ve casusluk iddiasıyla, gazeteciler Müesser Yıldız ve İsmail Düken'in devletin gizli bilgilerini açıklama iddiasıyla yargılandıkları davaların duruşmaları görüldü.
After the decree of acquittal issued for the defendants in the Gezi Park case was reversed by the appeal court on January 22, 2021, the Istanbul 30th Assize Court issued travel bans against Osman Kavala, Ayşe Mücella Yapıcı, Şerafettin Can Atalay, Tayfun Kahraman, Ali Hakan Altınay, Yiğit Aksakoğlu, Yiğit Ali Ekmekçi, Çiğdem Mater Utku, and Mine Özerden. The next hearing was scheduled for May 21st at Istanbul 30th Assize Court.
The retrial of Özgür Gündem editors-in-chief Şebnem Korur Fincancı, Erol Önderoğlu and Ahmet Nesin started at Istanbul 13th Assize Court after the acquittal decrees issued for them have returned from appeal. The court abided by the reversal decree issued by the appeal court and decided to write a letter for the files of Korur Fincancı, Önderoğlu, and Nesin to be merged with the Özgürgündem main case file at Istanbul 23rd Assize Court, with Eren Keskin, Zana Kara, Inan Kızılkaya and Kemal Sancılı on trial. The next hearing was scheduled for May 6th.
On the other hand, 17 organizations of freedom of expression, thought, and press freedom made a common declaration before the hearing and demanded for all charges against the rights advocates to be abated. The organizations include IFEX, which is the roof network of all advocates on freedom of expression around the world. The organizations have defined the case as a terrifying example of the witch hunt conducted by Erdogan against criticism and said, "We see the ongoing detainments and prosecutions against journalists in Turkey as an autocratic attempt to silence all oppositional voices and prevent journalists from executing their professions, and all such pressure against journalists, academics, and writers."
Journalist Idris Sayılgan was sentenced to 4 years of imprisonment in the lawsuit he was on trial at Muş Second Assize Court due to making illegal organization propaganda through his social media posts.
Journalist Alican Uludağ was sentenced to 10 months of imprisonment due to targeting those taking part in the fight against terrorism through his tweets, in which he criticized former Ankara Chief Public Prosecutor Yüksel Kocaman based on the news of his honeymoon with a helicopter and his visit to the palace after his wedding. Ankara 18th Assize Court deferred the announcement of the verdict.
The investigation conducted against Mesopotamia Agency reporter Mehmet Aslan, who was arrested on January 8th, was completed. The indictment prepared claimed that Mesopotamia News Agency was broadcasting in connection with an illegal organization and that Aslan provided the news that were provocative for the masses. The prosecutor's office presented the news reported by Aslan as crime in the indictment and claimed that his arrest being covered by the website ANF News is an evidence for illegal organization membership.
The indictment prepared against Yeni Yaşam Daily worker Ibrahim Karakaş, who has been arrested since November 6, 2020, was accepted by Adana 11th Assize Court. And the indictment prepared due to illegal organization membership. The investigations opened against those Karakaş spoke on the phone were made basis for the charges imposed against him. The social media posts of Karakaş were evaluated as criminal elements in the indictment as well, as the prosecutor claimed that the cell phone of Karakaş was off during the entire time he was in the illegal organization camp. Lawyer Turgay Bek pointed out that phone conversations usually become evidence for the charges, whereas in this case, the phone being off was considered as evidence for the charges imposed. The first hearing of the lawsuit will be held on March 23rd.
Mesopotamia Agency managing editor Ferhat Çelik was acquitted in the first hearing of the lawsuit filed against him at Bayburt Criminal Court of First Instance following the complaint of Bayburt Type M Closed Penitentiary Institute due to his news article on insects being added to the food of prisoners. The indictment prepared against the journalist had claimed an imprisonment sentence against the journalist for up to 3 years due to false accusation.
Journalist Banu Güven was acquitted in the first hearing of the lawsuit filed against her at Istanbul 41st Criminal Court of First Instance due to praising the crime and the criminal through a social media post.
Reporters Without Borders launched a statement that gives numbers on the situation of press freedom in Turkey. According to the numbers compiled with the help of Bianet, Turkey continues to be one of the prominent journalist prisons in the world, imprisoning more than 200 journalists and media workers in the last 5 years. 48 journalists have spent at least a day under detainment in the year 2020 in Turkey. The reasons for the detainment include reporting news on Syrian refugees, government measures against the COVID-19 pandemic, and the Kurdish question.
63 journalists were convicted of insulting the president in accordance with Article 299 of the Turkish Criminal Code since the start of Erdogan's presidency. Only last year, 1,358 online news articles were censored after the request of President Erdogan, his son Bilal Erdogan, his son-in-law Berat Albayrak, pro-government businessmen and politicians. 90% of the media is controlled by pro-government businessmen in Turkey, with 3,436 journalists being left unemployed in the last 4.5 years. The Press Ad Institute applied 276 days of advertisement bans against oppositional journalists in the year 2020.
The first hearing of the lawsuit filed against 12 students due to the protests organized against the trees being cut down for the unlicensed dormitory construction of Credit Dormitories Institute at the Middle East Technical University campus was held at Ankara 46 Assize Court. The prosecution of the students will continue on May 25th due to participating in illegal meetings and demonstrations.
A summary was prepared against People's Democratic Party, HDP, our parliament member, Dilan Dirayet Taşdemir, due to the speech she gave at the rally organized in Diyarbakır in 2019 for World Women's Day. In her speech, Taşdemir sent her greetings to Democratic Society Congress co-chair and Hakkari parliament member Leyla Güven, who was on a hunger strike at the time, and because of that, she is charged with praising the crime and the criminal, as well as public incitement towards resentment and hostility.
Süleyman Uysal was detained from his home after leaving a note on the windshield of a car that parked in a way that would prevent pedestrians from being able to pass the street in Ünye. It was later revealed that the car Uysal left the note on belonged to a prosecutor, and that's why he was detained. The note Uysal left had stated, "The spot you have parked your car is a pedestrian walk area, for your information."
Haftaya tekrar görüşmek dileğiyle. Hoşça kalın.